The avoidant doesn't become obsessed with everyone they date. They don't think constantly about every person they get involved with. They don't experience the consuming, intrusive, unbearable thoughts described in previous discussions about just anyone. The avoidant is selective about who captures their mental space in this profound way, and there's a specific type of person who creates this level of obsession in them. Understanding who this person is will shock you because it contradicts everything you think you know about what attracts avoidance. It's not the most beautiful person. It's not the most successful person. It's not even the most understanding or patient person, though those qualities matter. The person the avoidant becomes obsessed with is the person who makes them feel safe enough to attach deeply, while simultaneously triggering every attachment wound they carry. This person creates the perfect storm. Deep attachment that the avoidant can't control, combined with activation of all their fears about attachment. The combination is what creates obsession. The avoidant becomes obsessed with the person who simultaneously represents everything they want and everything they're terrified of, and navigating that contradiction is what makes forgetting this person impossible. The shocking truth is that avoidants stay obsessed with the person who loved them most authentically, while requiring the least from them. This seems backwards. You'd think the avoidant would be obsessed with someone who challenged them, someone who demanded more, someone who pushed them to grow. But that's not how avoidant psychology works. The avoidant becomes obsessed with the person who created the safest possible environment for attachment to form, who gave them space to be exactly as defended as they needed to be, who loved them without pressure to be different. This person allowed the avoidant to attach more deeply than they've ever attached because the conditions felt safe. But then, once deeply attached, the avoidance fear activated precisely because the attachment was so deep. And this sequence, safe attachment followed by terror about that attachment, is what creates the obsession. The avoidant is obsessed with the one person they felt safe enough to truly love, and the fact that they felt safe enough to love this person is exactly what made them too scared to keep them. The person the avoidant stays obsessed with is also the person who saw through their defenses without forcing them down. This person understood the avoidance patterns, recognized the fear underneath the coldness, saw the wounded child behind the defended adult, but crucially, this person didn't use their understanding to manipulate or to pressure the avoidant to change faster than they could. The understanding was offered as gift, not as weapon. And this quality, being deeply seen without being punished for what was seen, is so rare in the avoidance experience that when they encounter it, it creates imprint they can't erase. The avoidant has been with people who didn't understand them and people who understood them and used that understanding against them. But the person they become obsessed with is the one who understood them and still accepted them, still stayed, still offered love without making understanding into leverage. This experience of being known and still being loved is what the avoidant can't forget, can't replicate, can't stop being obsessed with. The specific qualities that create avoidant obsession. The person the avoidant becomes obsessed with has a specific combination of qualities that creates the perfect conditions for deep attachment followed by deep fear. The first quality is emotional stability. This person doesn't need the avoidant for emotional regulation. They have their own sources of well-being. They're not dependent on the avoidant's attention or validation to feel okay. This independence is crucial because it removes the pressure that usually makes the avoidant run. When someone needs them too much, the avoidance response is withdrawal. But when someone is genuinely stable and independent, the avoidant can relax. They can attach without feeling like they're being consumed. And the attachment that forms in this relaxed state is deeper than any attachment the avoidant has formed with someone who needed them more obviously. The second quality is patience without doormat energy. The person the avoidant becomes obsessed with was patient with their limitations, gave them space when they needed it, didn't pressure them for more than they could give. But this patience wasn't because the person had no standards or no self-respect. It was because the person recognized the avoidance patterns as fear rather than character flaws and chose to be patient while the avoidant worked through that fear. The patience had limits. There were boundaries about what treatment was acceptable. The patience was generous but not infinite. And this combination, patience with boundaries, is what made the attachment safe enough to form deeply. The avoidant knew they had room to be imperfect, but they also knew there were limits, and the limits made them feel safe rather than trapped, because limits meant the person valued themselves, which meant they were choosing the avoidant from strength rather than from desperation. The third quality is the ability to meet the avoidant where they are without staying there. This person could engage with the avoidant at their level of emotional availability without requiring immediate reciprocity, but they also modeled what healthier attachment looks like. They showed vulnerability appropriately without dumping. They asked for what they needed without demanding. They maintained their own life while being present in the relationship. The avoidant was learning from this person through observation rather than through pressure. And the learning created attraction because the avoidant could see what they could become if they did their work, could see what healthy relationship looks like, could see possibility without being forced toward it. The person who creates obsession is the one who makes growth look attractive through their example rather than through their criticism. The fourth quality is specific. This person made the avoidant laugh. Not just occasionally, but consistently. They had sense of humor that penetrated the avoidant's defenses, that made them relax, that created moments of genuine joy that the avoidant experiences rarely. Laughter is profoundly connecting, and for the avoidant who struggles with emotional intimacy, laughter is one of the few ways they can experience closeness without it feeling threatening. The person who made them laugh consistently created neural pathways connecting them with joy, and those pathways are part of what creates obsession. The avoidant's brain learned to associate this person with positive feelings that the avoidant doesn't experience often, and the brain wants more of what feels good, which means the brain keeps directing attention toward thoughts of this person even after they're gone. The fifth quality is that this person had their own purpose beyond the relationship. They had career they cared about, hobbies they pursued, friendships they maintained, goals they were working toward. The relationship was important, but it wasn't their entire life. And this quality is crucial, because it meant the avoidant never felt like they were the person's whole world, never felt the crushing pressure of being someone's only source of meaning. The person had a full life that the avoidant was invited into rather than expected to complete. And being invited rather than needed is what allowed the avoidant to attach deeply. When you're invited, you feel wanted rather than needed. Wanted is about choice and desire. Needed is about dependency. The avoidant can handle wanted, they can't handle needed. The person they become obsessed with is the one who wanted them without needing them, which allowed the avoidant to develop needs of their own, needs they now can't satisfy because the person is gone. Why this type triggers both love and terror. The person with these qualities creates perfect storm in the avoidance psychology. They trigger deep attachment and deep fear simultaneously. The deep attachment happens because all these qualities create safety. Safety is what allows the avoidance attachment system to activate. Usually, the avoidance attachment system stays relatively quiet because they're with people who trigger their defenses too quickly or too intensely. But with this person, the defenses can relax. The attachment system engages fully. The avoidant falls in love more deeply than they've ever fallen before, possibly more deeply than they knew they were capable of falling. And this depth of attachment is exactly what triggers the terror. The terror emerges because deep attachment means deep need, and need means vulnerability. Once the avoidant realizes they're deeply attached to this person, once they recognize that this person has become important to them in ways no one else has, panic sets in. They're vulnerable now. They could be hurt. They could be abandoned. They need this person, and needing means the person has power over them. All the avoidance fears about attachment activate at once, and the activation is proportional to the depth of the attachment. The deeper they've fallen, the more terrified they become. The person who made them feel safest eventually becomes the person who makes them feel most threatened, not because the person changed, but because the avoidance attachment to them became too deep for the avoidant to tolerate. The simultaneous love and terror create approach-avoidance conflict that's psychologically torturous. Part of the avoidant wants to move closer, to fully embrace the relationship, to keep the person who makes them feel things they've never felt. But another part is screaming that they need to escape, that they're in danger, that they've made themselves too vulnerable. The internal war is exhausting and destabilizing, and eventually, fear wins. Fear always wins in the avoidant unless they've done deep therapeutic work. The avoidant withdraws, becomes cold, creates distance, eventually loses the person. But losing the person doesn't eliminate the love or the fear. It just eliminates the relationship that was holding both in tension. And once the relationship is gone, what remains is the love without the fear's immediate trigger, which is what creates the obsession. The avoidant becomes obsessed with this person after losing them because the loss resolves the approach-avoidance conflict in the worst possible way. They no longer have to navigate between wanting to be close and being terrified of closeness because closeness is no longer possible. The person is gone, the relationship is over. And without the immediate threat of vulnerability that proximity created, the avoidant can finally feel the love without the terror overwhelming it. They can miss the person without the panic about needing them too much, because the need can't be satisfied anyway. They're safe from the vulnerability of the relationship while drowning in the loss of it. And this combination, feeling the love fully while being unable to act on it, is what creates the obsessive thinking, the intrusive memories, the inability to move on. Why they can't replicate it with anyone else. The avoidant tries to move on. They date other people. They seek new connections. But nothing comes close to what they had with the person they're obsessed with, and the failure to replicate creates more obsession because it proves the person was unique. The avoidant discovers that the specific combination of qualities that person had is rare. Most people who are emotionally stable and independent aren't interested in dating someone as avoidant as they are. Most people who are patient don't have the boundaries that made the patients feel safe rather than suffocating. Most people who can meet them where they are don't also model growth in ways that feel inspiring rather than critical. The combination of qualities was specific to this person, and the specificity is what makes them irreplaceable. The avoidant also can't replicate the feeling they had with this person because feelings aren't just about the other person's qualities, they're about timing, about where the avoidant was in their life, about circumstances that allowed attachment to form in ways it rarely forms. The avoidant might meet someone equally wonderful, but if their defenses are higher now after being hurt, if they're more scared now after losing someone important, the new person can't create the same sense of safety that allowed the previous attachment to form so deeply. The avoidant is comparing everyone to the person they're obsessed with, but they're comparing under different conditions. They were more open then than they can be now. They were less defended before they lost something precious. The comparison is unfair to everyone new because the avoidant isn't the same person who formed that original attachment. The avoidant also can't replicate the relationship because they know too much now. They know their patterns destroyed something good. They know their fear drives people away. They know they're difficult to love. This knowledge makes them more anxious in new relationships, more hypervigilant about their own patterns, more preemptively defended because they're trying not to repeat mistakes. But the defensiveness prevents the kind of attachment that created obsession in the first place. That attachment formed because the avoidant felt safe enough to let their guard down. But they don't feel safe enough anymore because they know what happened last time they attached deeply. They destroyed it. And knowing this makes them unable to create conditions for new deep attachment, which means new people can't become what the previous person was. The failure to replicate creates vicious cycle. The more the avoidant fails to find someone who creates what the obsession person created, the more obsessed they become with that person. Every failed date is evidence that person was special. Every disappointing new connection reinforces that what was lost was rare. Every comparison that finds the new person lacking adds to the mythology around the person they lost. The obsession grows because the avoidant is learning through repeated experience that what they had was irreplaceable, which means the loss is permanent, which means the regret is justified and will be lifelong. The obsession is fed by every failed attempt to move past it. The shocking reason is about the avoidance capacity, not the person. Here's the truly shocking revelation about why avoidants stay obsessed with only one type of person. It's not actually about the person being special, though the person was genuinely good. It's about that person being the one the avoidant was capable of attaching to deeply. The avoidant has limited capacity for attachment. Most people never get close to that limit because the avoidance defenses activate too early. But this one person, through having the exact right combination of qualities, managed to penetrate the defenses enough that the avoidant attached to their full capacity. And once someone has received the full capacity of the avoidant's attachment, once the avoidant has attached as deeply as they're currently capable of attaching, that person becomes unforgettable because they represent the maximum of what the avoidant can feel. The obsession is about the avoidant finally experiencing what they're capable of feeling and being shocked by the depth. Most of the avoidance relationships involve partial attachment. They're holding back, staying defended, never fully engaging. But with this person, the defenses dropped enough that the avoidant experienced something closer to full attachment. And the experience was revelatory. The avoidant didn't know they could feel that deeply. They didn't know they could need someone that much. They didn't know love could be that consuming. The relationship showed them their own capacity, showed them what they're capable of feeling when they're not completely defended. And you don't forget the person who showed you what you're capable of, especially when you're terrified you'll never be capable of it again, because it required circumstances and qualities you can't recreate. The shocking reason the avoidant stays obsessed with this type is also that this person represents everything the avoidant wishes they could be. The emotional stability, the healthy boundaries, the ability to be vulnerable without being needy, the capacity to love without losing yourself. All of these qualities the avoidant saw in this person are qualities the avoidant wants to develop but hasn't. The person was living example of secure attachment, and the avoidant got to experience what it's like to be loved by a securely attached person. That experience is intoxicating because it's so different from the anxious or avoidant connections the avoidant usually finds themselves in. The secure person was mirror showing the avoidant what they could become if they did their work. And you become obsessed with mirrors that show you your best possible self, especially when you know you're currently nowhere close to that self. The truly shocking reason is that the avoidance obsession isn't about the person they lost, as much as it's about the version of themselves they were able to be with that person. The avoidant was more open with this person than they've been with anyone. They were more vulnerable, more present, more capable of love. They experienced themselves differently, as someone who could connect, who could care deeply, who could be in relationship even if imperfectly. The person they're obsessed with is the person who made them feel like maybe they weren't as broken as they believed, like maybe they were capable of love after all. And losing that person means losing access to that version of themselves. The obsession is grief about losing the person, but it's equally grief about losing the self they got to be with that person. The self that felt more whole, more human, more capable than they feel now. What this means about attachment capacity and readiness. Understanding that avoidants become obsessed with the person they were able to attach most deeply to reveal something important about attachment capacity. It's not static. The avoidant who attached deeply to you might not be able to attach that deeply again for years, if ever, because capacity depends on internal state, on defenses, on unhealed wounds. You were able to reach their capacity because of timing, because of who they were when they met you, because of specific conditions that allowed their defenses to relax. But those conditions might never align again. The avoidant might become more defended after losing you, more scared, more convinced that attachment is dangerous. Their capacity for deep attachment might have peaked with you and might never reach that level again unless they do intensive therapeutic work. This reality is both validating and sad. It's validating because it confirms you weren't imagining the connection. The depth was real. The avoidance capacity was engaged in ways it rarely is. You did reach them more deeply than most people reach them. But it's sad because reaching their capacity doesn't mean you unlocked permanent change. The avoidant can attach deeply to you and still be too scared to maintain that attachment. They can love you to their full current capacity and still have that capacity be insufficient for sustaining healthy relationship. The depth of their attachment to you proves you were special to them, but it doesn't prove they were ready for you. Capacity and readiness are different things. They had capacity to feel deeply about you. They didn't have readiness to stay with those feelings. The avoidance obsession with you is also evidence that they recognize at some level that they lost something at the edge of their capacity. They lost the person who saw the most of them, who reached the deepest into them, who engaged the fullest version of their current attachment capability. And this recognition creates the obsession because it means the loss isn't just loss of person. It's loss of the deepest connection they're currently capable of forming. For the avoidant, you represent the ceiling of their emotional capacity. They can't go deeper than they went with you because they don't have capacity beyond what you reached. So losing you means losing access to the deepest possible experience of connection available to them at their current level of development. The obsession is about recognizing that you weren't just good. You were the maximum of what they could access, and losing the maximum means they're stuck with all future connections being less than what they experienced with you. Why understanding this should inform your decisions. Understanding that the avoidant is obsessed with you because you're the type who reached their deepest attachment capacity should inform how you think about potential reconciliation. If they come back, if they reach out wanting to try again, the question isn't whether they're obsessed with you. Of course they are. The question is whether their capacity has increased. Have they been in therapy? Have they done the work to develop ability to tolerate deeper attachment without terror? Have they healed the wounds that made deep attachment feel dangerous? If the answer is no, then their capacity is the same as it was, which means reconciliation leads to the same outcome. They'll attach deeply again because you're the type who reaches that capacity in them. But then the terror will activate again, and they'll withdraw again, and you'll lose them again. The obsession doesn't equal readiness. It just equals deep feeling that they're still incapable of sustaining in relationship. Understanding this should also help you release the fantasy that if you'd just been different, the outcome would have changed. The avoidance obsession with you proves you were exactly what they needed. You had the qualities that created safe attachment. You did everything right. The relationship failed not because you weren't enough, but because their capacity, while engaged fully by you, was still insufficient for sustained healthy relationship. You can't expand someone else's capacity through being more patient or more understanding or more anything. Capacity expands through therapeutic work, through healing attachment wounds, through developing distress tolerance that the avoidant doesn't currently have. You reach the limit of what they could handle. The limit was the problem, not your approach to the limit. Understanding why avoidants stay obsessed with only one type of person, the type who makes them feel safe enough to attach to their full current capacity, should also help you recognize your own worth. You're not just another person the avoidant dated. You're the person who reached them most deeply. You're the person who engaged their full capacity. You're the person who showed them what they're capable of feeling. That's significant, that's rare, that's worth recognizing and honoring in yourself. You have qualities that create deep attachment in defended people. Those qualities are valuable, but they're best directed toward people who have capacity beyond where the avoidant is, toward people who can receive what you offer and sustain it, toward people who've done enough work that deep attachment feels like gift rather than threat. The avoidant stays obsessed with you because you're the person who loved them best while triggering their wounds deepest, who created safety while activating terror, who reached their capacity while exceeding their readiness. The obsession is real. The depth is genuine. But the obsession without capacity development is just feeling without function, love without sustainability, attachment without ability to maintain it. The shocking reason the avoidant stays obsessed with only your type is that your type is the only type that gets through their defenses far enough to create real attachment. And real attachment is all the avoidant actually wants, but is the one thing their psychology is organized to prevent. You gave them what they wanted most and feared most simultaneously. That's why they can't forget you. That's why they'll compare everyone to you. That's why you'll be the one who got away. But being the one who got away isn't the same as being the one who they could have kept if they'd been different. And recognizing that difference is what frees you from waiting for someone whose obsession with you is real, but whose capacity to do anything functional with that obsession remains, without intensive work, permanently insufficient. The permanent mark you've left on their psychology. The person the avoidant stays obsessed with doesn't just occupy their thoughts temporarily. You've left permanent mark on their entire psychological landscape. You've become the reference point for everything that comes after. Every future relationship will be measured against what they had with you. Every new person will be compared to the safety you created, the depth you reached, the version of themselves they were able to be with you. You're not just a memory, you're the standard. You're the proof of what's possible when conditions are right. You're the evidence that they're capable of depth they can't access with most people. And this permanent status in their psychology is both curse and potential catalyst for them. The mark you left is cursed because it means the avoidant will likely never be fully satisfied with anyone else unless they do the work to increase their capacity beyond where it was with you. Everyone else will feel like settling. Everyone else will be missing something you had. Everyone else will fail to create what you created. The avoidant will go through life with you as ghost haunting every connection they attempt, with your memory making everyone else insufficient, with the depth they reached, with you making all other connections feel shallow. This is the price they pay for losing you. Permanent dissatisfaction with less than you, which is everyone else as long as their capacity remains unchanged. But the mark you left is also potential catalyst, if the avoidant ever becomes willing to face it. The obsession with you could eventually drive them to ask why. Why can't they forget you? Why can't they replicate what they had with you? Why did they destroy something so good? These questions, if pursued honestly with professional help, lead directly to the avoidant's core wounds. The obsession with you is roadmap to everything they need to heal. You represent their maximum capacity, which means understanding what happened with you means understanding their limitations. If the avoidant ever does the work, you'll be central to that work. You'll be the case study they examine to understand their patterns. You'll be the relationship they analyze to see where fear took over, where defense is activated, where they chose protection over connection. The obsession with you could be the thing that eventually saves them, though that salvation will likely happen long after you're gone from their life.